We're going to go ahead and call to order our July Planning Commission meeting. And
What am I missing?
I gotta move over because my screen's
They
blank.
can't see. Go ahead.
Okay.
I think personal might screen.
Okay, Ms. Reynolds, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Dowdy.
Here?
Mr. Babinet. Mr. Babinet.
I can't hear
Can't
her.
hear.
Mr. Kelly.
Here.
Mr. Conley.
Here.
Dr. Curran. Ms. Hennessy.
Here.
Here.
Okay.
I didn't hear my name, but I'm here.
Jean and Joanne, can you hear us?
Yes.
Yeah.
Good, okay, we can
Yes.
hear you too.
There's a screensaver sort of thing on my screen, but I can't see you guys.
Okay.
Fix that.
Lucky you.
There, Ms. Reynolds said they're trying to fix that as we speak, so
Okay.
we'll
Okay, we can hear. Go ahead.
we'll try to fix that. In the meantime, we'll look for movement ahead on the approval of the minutes. So we'll start with the minutes for April the 3rd. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Okay.
Wait, I have a comment.
What, yeah, we're going to comments right now. What comments do we have for the April 3rd minutes?
I thought, and it was months ago and I didn't go back and look at it, but I didn't think we wanted to go to amend the zoning from residential to active recreation and open space. I thought we specifically said we didn't want active recreation and open space, that we were talking about conservation. That we had a lot of issues for 12A and 12B being active recreation. So I didn't think we were doing that. Now, I know it was tabled, so we didn't do anything, but I thought our agreement was we wanted conservation.
She's referencing the April 3rd meeting.
Yeah, under old business 6B, the comprehensive plan amendment requests. You guys, Jean, you were there. Didn't we talk about it being open space? I mean, conservation, and we specifically didn't want open space because, and active recreation because of things that are allowed under that designation?
I might be confusing meetings, but I thought we settled on active recreation and didn't go to conservation on it.
So
I could be mistaken, though.
Just to clarify, the actual recommendation for the zoning change was to that there would be no change. So under
Right.
page 3, under C, you see that Mr. Iwan made the motion to recommend the town council at zoning and the comprehensive map remain the same. So essentially, there'd be no change to the existing designations.
Okay.
Yeah, that was the only vote taken.
Okay. Any other comments regarding the April 3rd minutes? Okay, if not, it's all in favor of approval, say aye.
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 I'll
Opposed?
abstain since I wasn't here.
Oh, that's true, you weren't here, okay. That's approved. The May 8th minutes, I have a motion for approval.
So moved.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Okay, so I have a second. How about comments regarding the minutes of May 8th? If no comments, all those in favor of approval? Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstain, I wasn't there.
Yeah, as well.
Yeah, and neither was John here. Okay, we'll move to June 5th meeting. Motion for approval of these minutes.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, comments regarding the June 5th meeting minutes.
Eighth.
The only question I had was the minutes say June 8th.
Minutes of June 8th.
Oh, you're saying the minute should be June 8th?
Okay.
I didn't look at the,
Sorry, I'm dyslexic.
Oh, it's June 5th.
Yeah, we'll take care of that.
okay.
Any other comments?
Okay, and we had the intent to comply with and possibly exceed DHEC standards was discussed. Okay, yeah, All right, that's fine,
Okay.
that's fine.
Okay, if no other comments, all those in favor of approving the June 8th minutes, say aye.
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 Okay, opposed? And we have approval. Okay. Moving on to the next agenda item is public comments. Do we have, welcome, public. We're glad you're here. Thank you for giving us your afternoon. Any comments? On today's agenda items, and you'll get another chance later on in the meeting if you want to wait till after you hear everything. Either, it's up to you. Yes, it is. Oh, absolutely. Give us your name and address, and we'd love to hear your comments.
Thank you. I'm Lance Spencer. I live at 40 Sunlit Bend. Thank you for taking up the stormwater topic. I listened to Mr. Taylor's comments yesterday at the council meeting as well, and it's a very important topic, as I'm sure I'm stating the obvious. Two anecdotal things that I think might help the conversation as you're considering this. Just recently with the last storm, my wife, Melissa Gurdon, sent the council members and Mr. Taylor some pictures yesterday where we saw that there was significant flooding at the Cape. And they were pumping, the contractor was pumping the water into the Charleston Beachwalker Park lot to be drained there. And it was pretty nasty looking water. So I'm not even sure if it was all storm water, but that's just conjecture. But thank you to Mr. Taylor. He jumped right on it after hours and responded and offered to take a look at it. So thank you for that. The other thing we noted with the storm is we live on the inlet at Inlet Cove, just off of Beachwalker. And the retaining pond on the other side of, over by the Sparrow Pond, was as high as I've ever seen. And I know KICA manages all that and the drain and flow through.
Sure.
But it just reemphasizes the need, I think, for this conversation. The water that was being released that goes through the inlet where we live, there's erosion issues. KICA has put in sandbags for most of the places. Some of it's failed already. Seeing that murky water even still today that's flowing through just highlights the need for the stormwater conversation to have. And I imagine that the ordinance and the plan you're considering probably won't affect Ocean Pines, but I will say that does concern us, as we've conveyed to Mr. Taylor before, that getting rid of that, changing the complexion of the community there, we're downstream from that. And so I think we're kind of downstream from everybody at Inlet Cove. So anyway, thank you again. Thanks to Mr. Taylor for his efforts with this, and I appreciate that. I hope that helps your considerations.
Thank you, Lance. Yes, town council did an excellent job yesterday discussing stormwater for quite an amount of time, and we'll be continuing that shortly on our agenda. Mr. Taylor, new business update.
I'll just briefly give an update on Q1X and then jump into our new business as outlined. The subcommittee that's been established regarding Q1X continues to work. There's been a date set for August for that group to reconvene. The process continues. I think it's a formidable process in this same pattern of being able to go through the document, provide some important changes and revisions based on some substantial feedback and I think good input to steer the document in a way that everyone would be significantly proud of. So that is still tentatively still working through that subcommittee. And as soon as we are ready to present that for the general public, and not even before it reaches the general public, the full planning commission, and ultimately having town council look at it as well before we go to the general public. So that's just a continued work in progress. But thank you to those members who have diligently used their summer time to kind of help work through that particular document.
John, I think Joanne pointed out a couple, she wasn't seeing some corrections in she had, or comments that she had made on the documents and when she was editing it. have you gotten to the point where you've been able to incorporate all the?
We're trying to work in, because we've received it from different sources, we're trying to work it into the same document. The document I think that you are referencing, and Ms. Hennessy pulls up, it's the document that it was originally shared out. That's not, so the revised document is not in that same share folder, if that makes sense. So once we, I think, compile it from myself, Stephanie, and even you have sent separate documents. So it's been a little bit challenging to pull all of those to one document. But that's what we're working on today.
Okay, and then another question, related question, is that when we get the document, will we see what has been edited? I mean, because, are we going to have to match it up to see what the changes were that you've incorporated?
There are ones, the Word document format, we have those in a red line. The goal, I think, is to just put it in a clean document because I think it has been looking substantially what I would call different.
Yeah.
And that allows you, I think, to just have a clean view opposed to seeing a significant amount of red line version. If the desire is to see both of those, we would need to truncate the various inputs into one document, which we're working on today.
Okay. I'm just trying to anticipate, and I would say, I'd kind of like to see what changes were made, and, so that way if, for example, it may not be 100% agreement on a particular change, and we can discuss it.
So what I'll do is then utilize the red line version as the version that we share with you guys. So that way you all are able to see the changes that have
What do you
been
guys
made.
think? You guys in agreement with that?
Yeah.
Yeah. I would see, I know it'd be easier
Yes.
for me.
Okay.
I would like us to get that, it'll have been almost a month next week, maybe get it, say no later than July 17th, so that we all have plenty of time to go through it and spend time with it, whereas, so we don't have to do it all in a weekend again. But if we say, let's say 2 weeks from today is July 17th, that would be, a good 5 weeks since we met last. Is that adequate time for you to get the subcommittee that document?
Yeah, I need to take bases with Stephanie as well, because we both have been working on the document. So prior to me confirming an actual date to return the materials to you, I would want to clarify that date. So, but that seems reasonable.
Okay, thank you.
John, the current version is, if you will, the product of what or who? The product of consultants, product of staff, not the product of the planning commission.
When you say the product, the revised draft is,
Whatever,
so the revised draft that's being working on now, and it's between staff and the working subcommittee of members of the Planning Commission. So that would include Ms. Hennessy, Mr. Iwan, and Dr. Curran. And so collectively with staff, those three individuals have sort of powered through looking at the entire document.
and you were gonna send that out before,
Yeah, once
no,
I
not
done,
once.
once
once you received it from the consultants, you were gonna send it out?
no, so it's being worked on by staff right now.
You haven't received it back from the consultants yet?
So
What document are we talking about?
all right, so let me just take a one step back and kind of give you an overview just to kind of ensure we're on the same page. The latest version that the full commission has seen
Of what?
of the Kiwanis Next document,
Right.
that document is being worked on to be revised by a subcommittee of the Planning Commission. That subcommittee of the Planning Commission is still working through providing those revisions.
Excuse me, the process you explained last meeting was that you were waiting for the consultants to send you back a document, a revised document, and that the new subcommittee would go back and work on that. You also indicated you would send out to everyone on the committee a copy of that document when received
Yes.
from the
Consultant.
consultants, not after it was worked on.
So there hasn't been a document that the consultants have modified. Those modifications are being done by the subcommittee that was referenced.
Wait a minute. Last meeting, you said the consultants were working on changing the document from the last meeting, including the last 4 or 5 pieces of the document that weren't reviewed by the full committee. And then you were going to, once they finished it, you were going to get back to us, all of us, with a copy of that document.
Yeah, so to that point, the remaining elements that the full planning commission did not make its way through, those particular elements will pause to allow this subcommittee to do that same process with those remaining elements before we bring it back to the commission to keep.
Back to Larry's point then, the only way we're going to be able to trace it is to have all the pieces.
Yeah, so
So you're going to have to send us what the consultant sent back, what the subcommittee changed, what you and staff have changed, if you will, and so we can put all 3 together so we know what we're working with.
So it'll be, you'll see a red line version of the previous version that you saw and what the subcommittee,
From what? What are we starting with?
the latest version of the comp plan
From?
that we received from the consultants.
Andy, maybe I can help. Is that, so, what was sent to the subcommittee has been working on it, Joanne, myself, and Ron.
Ron.
Was the version you saw, the last version that was submitted. We have provided independently, we independently sent all the changes, and when we went, each one of us took an element and reviewed the element and did some editing. That's going to be incorporated into one document. So you'll have the original document that you saw, and you're going to have a document that's been edited and modified which includes what the staff is doing. It's one document. The staff's made changes and the subcommittee's made changes. So it'll only be 2 documents, the original and the changed document.
The original document you're saying we saw?
We saw, it was the
No
original.
changes on that one?
No, that's the original one.
And is that the document we were waiting for?
No,
Well, what were we waiting for?
we're waiting for these changes to take place because there was a lot of editing. There was,
Wait a minute, you just said it wasn't. We saw it all.
you saw the original, and from that original, a subcommittee and the staff are making changes.
The last time we had a workshop, were there changes made in the document we saw at
You
the
have,
workshop?
they're being made.
Yeah, the last workshop we had, when they had all 7 commissioners, the consultants were with us. We went through, I recall, I think maybe as high as element number 6, and the consultant made the changes based on our input that we gave the consultants at that particular meeting, and then they were sent to John, and then we put together a subcommittee because we had 7 commissioners plus the 2 consultants make 9, plus John makes, and his staff made 10, 11, and 12. And we just I felt that there was too many cooks in the kitchen, so that when we met for 2 hours, there was just so much going on with 12 people looking at a document. So myself and Luke Farrell sat down and said, what if we have a subcommittee, and then we take the document and progress and then send it back to the full commission, and it will give us a chance to shorten the process as well as create the accuracy and timeliness that we all wanted to occur. And I think that's, in a nutshell, where we are, Andy.
Yeah, but the red line document, I'm still going back to what we're going to see. The red line document is a document that has been changed since we saw.
It's being changed.
It's
in the
being
process.
changed. It's
You
being
just-
changed. What you saw,
Yeah,
and stop at that particular phase, the subcommittee are making the changes along with the consultant, then that will come back to everyone to see it again.
the changes that the consultant are going to show in this document
Yes,
are what? Changes that came out of the workshop?
With
Or
Partly,
new changes?
partly.
partly with the
So
with the
there's other
subcommittee.
And other,
And we're going to see all the red line changes
That's
from the original document.
I think,
Yes.
is that what that's what we agreed to, I think.
That's the desire of the commission. We can share from that last iteration that you see to this revised one.
John, it's not the
Andy,
desire of
what's
the
your
commission.
concern?
It has to be. You've got to be able to show it to us.
Yes.
Andy, what's your concern?
We don't know what the starting point is.
Yes,
Here we go.
yeah. I have,
It's not what he explained.
I don't know what else to, other than.
Endpoint.
And we also heard at the last meeting, we were going to get a copy the whole commission was going to get a copy of what the consultant sent back.
Well, that's changed. Basically, we're gonna get the
Oh, of
whole.
course it changed.
Andy, listen a second. The whole commission is gonna get a document with all the changes on, what do we say? We're shooting for the 17th of whatever it was?
Yeah.
That's when you're gonna get the document that we were working on, that we're gonna use then to finalize it. And it'll be redlined. You'll see what was the original and what was changed.
Do any of the elements change?
No. I mean, there are 11 elements. They're still there.
11 elements.
We went from that document, all we were doing was crossing things out and rewriting things.
And what are you planning on the 17th, a workshop or a meeting?
Workshops.
Neither,
Nothing, just a receipt of the document.
just to get the document
The
so
one
that
you-
we can review it for our August
That's
workshop.
what you're asking for. You're gonna get what you're asking for to review prior to August, what are we doing, August 5th, is that when we,
12th,
12th?
August 12th.
12th, okay.
All right.
Okay. I think we've gotten there, so let's move on. John, you ready to discuss new business, first item?
Yes, so on our agenda for new business, there is a proposed zoning text amendment. This is case number AZO 24-000008. This is a text amendment to modify existing sections in our zoning code, specifically section 12-128, access parking and loading regulations, section 12-63, our description of zoning districts and regulations, and also amending our definitions section of 374, 12-374. All of this is in efforts essentially to modify existing standards regarding parking and driveways, and it's essentially our pervious paving requirements. So what I'll do is to give us a background of how we got here and then provide an opportunity for you guys to see the actual proposed language and ask any questions there before there's any unreadiness to take any action. So as part of the comprehensive marsh management plan that was adopted in 2023, and we've been essentially a year to date in the adoption of that particular plan. One of the specific recommendations from the comprehensive marsh management plan was to strictly limit impermeable surfaces as well as formalize stormwater best management practices for private properties. There's an outline that's already part of your materials in understanding the justification for why looking at permeable surfaces and the benefits to those to the island and looking at permeable materials. So I won't go through that, but I do want to just highlight that this particular recommendation that's coming from the Comprehensive Marsh Management Plan Subcommittee and staff as well supported this initiative. It's supported by not only the Comprehensive Marsh Management Plan, but the Flood Mitigation and Sea Level Rise Adaptation Report that was completed in 2018. It's also consistent with elements of nature-based solutions that the Conservancy has produced, as well as general low-impact design and planning elements for the state of South Carolina. All of these particular documents and recommendations are consistent with our comprehensive plan. And so staff feels that this particular recommendation is consistent, and we feel pretty good about moving in this direction. The other thing that I would note that the Community Rating System, CRS, that's an incentive program that's tied to floodplain management and FEMA requirements for flood insurance. And so this particular ordinance would be able to be added into that network of opportunities to fold into how the town is audited regarding our flood insurance as it pertains to CRS credits. Within your materials you've outlined, I thought it would be good for us to share just examples of pervious materials, and then once you get to the actual ordinance itself, you have a better understanding of the different options that property owners would be able to have on their properties. Patria has prepared a number of these slides to kind of compare the examples before you. We know that a number of these are already occurring on the island. And so we wanted to just show pervious concrete pavers. If you are traveling on the island, you know that the Oceanwood story that we used is a success model. These are very durable. They're easy to maintain once installed, and they really depend on the site conditions of that installation. Relatively, approximately rather $14 to $28 per square foot, and these work well for the island. The other note that I would like to make regarding these is that part of this recommendation, it's not for us to pinpoint a property owner to one product type, but to allow them to be able to choose different product types. So pervious paving is one of those. There are other pervious paving systems that can be used. These are commercial grade products where you see there's a fillable pervious material inside, sort of a structured element that's placed. Most times they're plastic cells or concrete. These require some maintenance depending on the type of material that's used for them. But these also are seen on the island in different areas. Here are other few examples: pervious concrete drives and walkways, pervious asphalt and concrete. While I can't quote exact locations of these type of materials on island, you know that there are an option for these to become used as permeable. And so as part of the recommendation, we're offering this as an understanding that asphalt, porous concrete or porous asphalt, which essentially is a detail that allows water to still infiltrate through that system. Some of you may be familiar with more soft materials like pea gravel or oyster shell plantation mix that's used pretty frequently on the island. The example of the new farm stand over at Kiowa River, that parking lot is kind of an example of a soft material for pervious elements. And so as part of the recommendation, you see 3 sections of the zoning code that's being requested for amendment today. One, like I said, section 12-128, section 12-63, section 12-374. As part of your action today, of course, as you all are familiar, the Planning Commission can take action by recommending approval or denying that proposed amendment. And so you guys can make modifications. As stated earlier, staff feels that this is consistent with the approval criteria that's been outlined. And so that wraps up the actual introduction to this. Mr. Chair, what I'll do is just go through the ordinance itself to highlight the different sections. So right now, I'll start at section 12-63. Just for that, in your materials, you can note the red line version. So one of the notes to highlight is that this new ordinance would now require all driveways and parking areas to be permeable. Our current code has a built-in incentive for permeable walks or patios, raised courtyards, planters, as well as driveways that are not defined in our ordinance. So these would be areas of additional turnaround, additional parking. If a property owner chose to make those elements pervious, then they would be credited with an allowable increase. And we have quite a few properties that take advantage of that incentive. But it's really, with this new proposed ordinance, that incentive is sort of counterintuitive, because now parking areas and all driveway areas will be required to be permeable. So what staff has done is essentially allowed the allowable increase to still be present based on the maximum lot coverage, but has reduced that amount. So if you can notice, based on the maximum lot coverage as shown for residential zoning districts for 50%, that's being reduced from 10 to 2.5. For 40%, that's being reduced to 5%, and the 33% is being reduced to 10%. So for an example, just so you get a clear understanding of how that percentage works, if the maximum lot coverage for a subject property is 33%, that means that 10% is only 10% of the 33%. So it's not looking at 10% of the entire property. It's only 10% of the maximum lot coverage. So in this particular instance, where we have driveways now be eliminated from the allowable increase. Only pervious walks or patios and raised courtyards would be entitled to that 10%. It's a minimal incentive. We actually kind of debated whether or not we exclude pervious walks from this, but I think that's one of the points that you guys can kind of discuss today. I see a question, Laura.
Yeah, I just wanted to understand, I think I know the logic, but the concern is that if we allowed it on the driveway and they got a, at some point, let's say a 20% increase, that would be more of the footprint that would be under a roof, which would create more runoff water?
So that was the hesitation of just doing a blanketed, let me try to respond in an example.
Let me ask a question. The question is,
different.
why did we do it?
Why
Why did we eliminate the driveways?
Because now it's required to be pervious. So if you're required your driveway to be pervious, we're not going to give you an additional coverage towards your house because now that makes a larger house. So essentially.
Well, that's my question.
Yeah.
the question.
So yeah,
That's my question.
That's the reason why, yes.
Okay, and then a larger house would
Result in
would
more-
have
more-
more water runoff and things,
Correct.
okay.
Yes.
That's what I thought, but I just wanted to make sure.
Since this whole issue is a discussion issue today and no vote,
Oh, no, I think this
No,
was
we're
a vote.
voting.
We're voting.
We'll allow a vote after everyone has their questions and discussions handled.
So just to continue on the actual ordinance, so under that same section 12, that was the only thing under section 12-63. If we were to shift to section 12-128, this is actually where we note in the access and driveway section 1, there's a new clause that's added that all new driveways and driveway replacements. And what we did is incorporate the effective date. So once this, if this goes through the adoption process, that effective date will be placed in the ordinance so that all driveways post that date would now be required to be pervious. So we're not asking that anyone go and rip up their driveway today.
Correct.
But anything moving forward, it would be required to be
And you also
permeable.
put them, it has to, if it's 50% or more, then it's required, but if it's under 50% to repair a drive, you don't have to do it, is that correct?
Yes, so, is that question adding it into this section? Is that what the?
No, I remember reading it, I'm just trying to keep my mind straight, so. You said if you're replacing a driveway, if you have to fix, you're replacing more than 50%, then it has to become pervious. But if it's less than 50%, you can replace it with the same material that's there right now.
Yeah, so that follows our current, our current code of 50% home value to bring it up to code. So that's the rule, yeah. I thought that you were heading to making the ordinance read a little bit more clearly here, adding that sort of language in this particular section, which it could be valued, I think. So it's.
All driveways and driveway replacements of 50% or more, you could do that if you wanted to.
On flipping a couple pages, you'll see that on page 6 of 10 of that same ordinance, 128, number 12, under D, parking design standards, we've outlined that all required surfing parking facilities shall be constructed of a pervious surface. This was just to reiterate under the design section, as contractors and design teams look at our ordinance, having it consistent under this section allows them to understand what the requirements are.
I'm sorry, where are you at?
Under D, page
Yeah.
6 of 10.
6 to 10, okay.
Yeah. And, Ms. Hennessy, you have a question?
Yeah, I just want to make sure, the parking is for single family and multifamily, but the other part with the incentives is just single family, is that correct?
When you say the incentives,
The lot coverage back on, where back on page 1, the maximum lot coverage is shown in residential district and the allowable increase, and that's just for pervious walks and patios and things.
So that
Not drive-
allowable
But
increase.
is that just, so is there a separate thing on pervious surfaces for multifamily?
So it applies to our residential zoning district, so it would qualify for multifamily as well under our R3 or R2 zoning districts.
Okay, so I guess my concern is I don't know that we want to give a lot coverage incentive for doing this.
Well, that's how it's currently built into the code. So if the change is asking to remove that, that would be a different pattern than what's currently allowed in the code today. So to give you an example, the R3 zoning district, most of those do not follow the 33% category, so their actual allowable increase is a lot less than what's the 20% that's in the R1 zoning district. So if you're looking mostly for multifamily, based on the question, either 40% or 50%, that's only a 10 or 15% in our current code today of allowable increase. And most times that they would not qualify because it's only calculating the areas not defined by, not a driveway not defined in our ordinance. So additional, most of the multifamily are driveways are consistent of only that pathway to the actual structure. Whereas single-family homes, we see a lot more creativity in additional bump outs and turnarounds or circle drives, that type of thing.
Okay. So we can debate whether we want to have an incentive or not.
Yeah, all of this is sort of debatable for you guys. If you wanted to eliminate the entire incentive section, we felt that just to keep it in because there were two more elements under that section where it's pervious walks and patios and raised courtyards and planters that felt that could still be utilized as an incentive. If you all recall, when we first introduced this at our last Planning Commission meeting, the subcommittee of the Marsh Management Plan had always took an approach to have a dual prong with both regulatory changes and incentives. It's just so happened that the incentives regarding the driveway replacement program did not sort of get the council support to kind of move forward. We're still working on that, but it's just those types of incentives were less likely to get immediate delivery to property owners. And so eliminating this particular incentive that's built in, I wouldn't necessarily discourage it, but it would be a little hesitant to say that you're adding regulatory changes and removing the incentives that are already allowed in our zoning code.
And John, would any of these changes impact the resort designations for parking lots?
If any of their properties, yes. This ordinance would apply to all properties. So if the resort is to come with a new application after this has been passed, their parking areas would be required to be permeable.
Okay.
If there are any other questions, the last page, 9 of 10, on section 128, this is just the paving and drainage. What we wanted to do is just clarify here that if there's an existing structure, that parking areas underneath that structure need not be permeable. So that's what that particular section refers to. In addition, you'll see in the definition sections, we've actually defined now what permeable or redefined what pervious surfaces mean. And so we've actually added in now an infiltration rate. And what that just means is the ability to be able to measure how that water soaks into the ground, and that is 0.1 inch per hour. That's consistent with most of, I think, Charleston County and some other jurisdictions that we've looked at. That's another opportunity for the commission to discuss to go even more restrictive, but that's just I wanted to highlight that. And then you'll see in the final section, 12-374, there is an outline for bioretention, a new definition for bioretention. As I just mentioned, the pervious surface definition was refined to include that infiltration rate. So that concludes sort of the actual walking through the ordinance. Mr. Chair, if you want to just take these individually, and we can do that, if there aren't any other questions by the commission.
Okay, thanks, John. Good explanation. First, I think as we look at these individually, does everyone on the commission feel like they've had their questions answered, or do you want any further explanation?
Yeah, I'd like a few questions answered. One specifically is the misleading direction we're getting from the memo that covered all the material we're reading. And it said it's here for PC discussion, and it would help as a context in the initial structure and process standards. After the discussion on Wednesday's meeting, it would be hopeful to hear the guidance necessary to provide a draft ordinance. Now I'm hearing we're gonna pass pass a draft of the proposed ordinance, if that's what it is. And I'm unclear as to exactly what we're doing, because I have a number of questions, whether or not it's an ordinance. A lot of the material seems to come to conclusions, and I'd like to know what the basis of the conclusions are. For example, how many properties on the island, having gone through site review and having drainage plans cleared, are actually now, except for the abnormal storm, releasing stormwater onto the roadways?
I don't have an exact
I'd say all of them,
What?
all of them.
I'd say none of them.
Well, you didn't see my driveway water going down,
Yeah, and where does your driveway go?
it goes to the street.
Then it's designed wrong.
Well, excuse
It's
me,
approved
well, but
wrong.
you asked a
Yours
question.
may have to be corrected.
So I
Like
think,
right now, they're all draining into properties.
so that might be one of the discussion points for the stormwater, but if there's stuff regarding the impervious surface, permeable section,
Well, most of them right now are permeable.
no, I'm saying the actual, the new business, that agenda item, what I anticipate, what I understand your question to be regarding stormwater, we can have that question appeared around the stormwater discussion at the next agenda item,
Right.
opposed to the current agenda items discussing the permeable ordinance of permeable parking requirements.
I don't understand what you just said.
What do you
That
say?
discussion is going to be for what? Change the ordinance again?
No, he's just saying any discussion regarding stormwater runoff is going to be discussed when we get to the next agenda item, which is the stormwater management strategies and proposed regulatory changes. We'll get to that piece.
Isn't that the proposal? It's in.
No, we're strictly talking about the permeable surfaces right now.
Which one of these? Which one of these? The draft? This?
Yes, so that's what we're discussing.
That's what we're discussing.
Right now.
Right. And that doesn't cover individual driveways?
Yes, driveways,
Yeah, it
yes.
does.
But it's just,
So how many of them are now dispensing water into the streets?
I don't think anyone knows that answer.
yeah, I don't,
That would be a help to understand why an ordinance is being proposed.
Well,
If there is a,
Well, the ordinance being proposed to have less water runoff because
but
of
we
the
don't know if
pervious
anything's
driveways.
running off.
Well, that'd be your opinion.
And
Andy.
again, if it's not broken, what are we fixing?
Well, if we can make it better.
It's broken.
Well, we don't know what's better.
Impervious surface on the island, because the more impervious surface you have on any given piece of land, the more water has to run off that area. So what we're trying to do here is help people maintain their stormwater runoff on their property, much as many other
Well, now it's on the property, not on the streets.
municipalities have. It's not that complicated.
Oh, so the ordinance should be on the property, is that what you're saying? The runoff is on the property, not the street?
Can't hear you.
Can't hear you.
Okay. Let's move forward.
John, I just have a question about the 1/10 of an inch. Is that a national standard of some sort? Or?
I think that's pretty comparable. I've seen a 3/10 of an inch in some ordinances. Staff went with the 1/10 of an inch. I think that as a sort of a starting place, I think it's a little aggressive to go 3/10 of an inch at this point, with us still kind of looking at a number of stormwater and elements. So, but that's pretty consistent with the Charleston County metrics that they've used.
And the larger you make that number, the less options there'll be available, right?
Possibly, yes. Possibly. The reason I say possibly because you have, yes, I think the less options, the reason I hesitate is because a designer is going to look at whatever soil types that you have on your property and make a determination with that, plus the aesthetic values. So there's a lot of different things that you probably can play into that. That infiltration rate, if we were to set it at a specific number, probably would limit those different product types. So that's the yes component. Yeah.
That's my point.
Yeah.
And John, one other question. I really like what you and the staff have done on this, so kudos to you. Have you guys received any feedback from homeowner associations, ARB, about the choice that we're making available? Because, we're trying to do some of these in the West Beach area. And I know some of the HOAs are restrictive with respect to what type of pavers can be used, what type of surfaces can be used. Will the message get out to be a little bit more liberal so we could do more things like this?
So twofold. One is at its surface level, our subcommittee of the Marsh Management Plan includes representation from most of all the entities, including the ARB, including KICA, which they've been supportive.
Okay.
The Conservancy have been supportive of this. The subcommittee has all been sort of marching in the same drum of this. Gene, the second thing that I'll note is that we're working with the Conservancy right now, and they're doing an analysis to actually study how much impervious cover that we have across the entire island. That study is still being completed. I got permission from Lee to use a approximate number, which is around maybe 15% of when we're looking at just the uplands, that how much impervious cover that we would have, and that including rooftops, potential driveways, et cetera. And so at the end of the day, what our subcommittee wanted to do is, once that data is completed, we can, at least for Kiowa now, have a benchmark to set and be able to identify a goal for the community to say, hey, in 2024, we're at this number. As we make these particular changes, we can monitor within a 2-year, 5-year span how to be able to reduce that total number. And now that becomes a new marketable value for Kiowa as a lead in this area of resiliency.
And then through education, we get the HOAs on board too, I imagine.
And the educational component, I'm glad you referenced that, because I know I've sent you some materials already as a planning commission representative. We have been engaged with a number of regimes. You guys recall our last meeting, Ms. Sherry Gallagher on KICA board as the regime liaison, represented that she would be helpful in just having orchestrated the conversations between regimes and these efforts. We're continuing those efforts to try to educate as many the regimes as possible. Staff is also working on a series of videos, podcasts, or our video team, Neil, our communications team will be working with our subcommittee to actually produce an on-site video at different properties so property owners can get an understanding of the questions to ask to the contractor, how to properly install, how to properly maintain these permeable different product types, And it really, I think, helps educate everyone of the purpose of why we are headed down this direction. It's not just to add more regulation, but it's a goal to reduce the amount of stormwater that is essentially tangentially related to flooding. So that's kind of where we are in this stage of process.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay. Thanks, John. Any other questions before we move this ahead? And John, you're asking us to vote on these three separately?
If there are no suggested changes between the three, I'm comfortable with you all approving each of them together. But I thought there might have been some suggested changes or language modifications.
Okay.
I have a question, John.
Sure, go ahead.
One of the criteria is for the planning commission to have a public hearing. Is there any plan to have one here, or are we eliminating that requirement on this end and giving that responsibility to the town council?
Yeah, we'll follow in our same rhythm. The ordinance only requires that a public hearing be held between the adoption process. So typically, we've held that public hearing with town council. So that would be scheduled for first reading if this is recommended to town council at that time.
Given the fact that all driveway in the future or after whatever certain date you're going to put in here are going to require pervious or impervious, pervious surfaces, what is the purpose of having a public hearing other than to hear from people who would be affected and be the entire community? Why wouldn't we want to know that and what their issues are with or without the ordinance before we go ahead and approve anything?
I mean, the commission always could offer, if they would like a public hearing as part of their recommendation process, that's always something the commission can do.
But yet, it's been decided we're not going to have one.
Because we've typically, in any ordinance amendment, have made recommendation at planning commission and have scheduled now that sort of initial conversation with the community at planning commission. And once it gets to town council, that public has a direct access to the decision maker. And so that's been Kiowa's sort of rhythm since I've been on staff.
We've had
Right.
public hearings at the planning commission level in the past.
I'm not saying that we have not. I'm saying the typical rhythm has been recommendation, planning commission, and then at first reading, we've had our public hearing before council gets that second reading.
We basically have given up that responsibility to the town council.
If the commission would like to add another public hearing, that's the discretion of the planning commission.
I think this is an appropriate situation where we need to have definitely an understanding of what the community thinks of this proposal and whether or not they believe the system that we have in place that's being operated by the utility is not doing an effective job, and that the approval of projects is not effective in preventing excess stormwater runoff. That's not in keeping with the standards. Again, we have no evidence that says it's not.
I would add the recommendation that's in the comprehensive marsh management plan. We had definitely a number of workshops in the settings that looked at all of the recommendations that were provided as part of that. So this action of the zoning ordinance amendment is directly tied to the recommendations that were birthed out of that particular plan.
It was in there, but there was no community input to the specific situation we're talking about.
Well, community, this is nothing that's being sprung on someone by surprise. It's been a part of the past discussions and stormwater management discussions. And I think everybody pretty much have had a chance to weigh in on it. But from what we're hearing, even among ourselves, is that if there's a way for us to reduce the water runoff by using these particular driveway alternatives, it's a win-win.
You think anybody had an opportunity to input on a specific recommendation like this?
I can't
I
answer
think
that,
the
Andy.
market management plan people had a lot of public hearings. And Bill, I would be comfortable, given there is going to be a public hearing in town council, they do a first reading. I think there's going to be plenty of opportunity for residents to have input. And the town council can take our recommendation, and they can, if they hear a whole bunch of stuff that makes them think they want to do something different, they can amend it. They have that right. So I think we can go ahead and move ahead with this.
No, I think that's good.
Totally agree.
I think that's good input. Yes, Mr. Mayor?
Came up in the town council yesterday, and I think some great important issues were raised by Commissioner Capelli. We had committed to doing a workshop, a town council workshop on stormwater management issues. And we want to hear from Kika, from Stantec, their engineering consultant, our engineering consultant, the Conservancy, and certainly the commission could participate in that, and we could hear from regimes as well. That might provide, John, a good forum for a broader discussion of these issues. It wouldn't be part of the kind of formal public hearing process that people tend not to say much at anyway when we do first reading. But if we put this out as an opportunity to discuss these stormwater management issues, that might be a good forum to combine efforts on that.
I watched that yesterday. It's a great way of making sure we're going one step further to doing the right things.
Yeah, that's part of the outline that staff has put together, that we'll be putting together that workshop, so yes. Yeah.
So I think before us, we have the opportunity now to go ahead and at least from the planning commission's perspective is to vote on this particular text amendment and then put it forth to the town council, and we'll take it one step at a time.
Bill, I disagree.
Oh,
Again, what the mayor just said is they're going to throw it open at a workshop without the opportunity of having a draft. Why do we need to vote on a draft?
Then then we do this next month. What's the difference, in your opinion? If we do this again next month?
Andy,
Where
because,
do you stand?
Andy, because the text changes have got to come from the planning commission.
Yeah.
And we're going to have something specific that the workshop can use as the basis to generate the conversation, as opposed to something that's
They don't need an ordinance basis. They have a proposal from staff.
okay. Bill,
Can I make a motion that we approve this ordinance?
You have a motion? Have a second?
I would second it.
Have a second? All those in favor of
Wait,
approving?
you have discussion first.
Yeah,
Discussion?
discussion.
Any further discussion, I should say?
I just have a hard time in my mind understanding who would be opposed to this. I don't see that this is so onerous that and to me, everything I've ever seen so far with this material is it offers benefits to stormwater management, but it also really has a nice aesthetic feel to it in a lot of areas, so.
I'll go a step further. We have an existential problem with water, and it's going to get worse. And anything we can do to kind of curb that, I think, is something we should try to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it goes right along with the green initiative of doing these type of things for our island. So we have a motion, and I have a second. All those in favor of approval, say aye.
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 Opposed?
No,
Okay. Okay, John, you're going to further update us now on the stormwater?
Yes, so on your agenda, this is a discussion item only, and so in continuing the light of stormwater management on the island, what's before you is an outline of some possible strategies for proposed regulatory changes. And what I thought would be helpful, I won't go back through the sort of the origin here, but I do want to highlight that this is a comprehensive approach to us looking at stormwater management. So what we just did is sort of the recommendation falling under permeable requirements. That's just one tooth, if you will, in the full gator's mouth of all of the different options that we could consider as a community to address stormwater management. The comprehensive approach is taken this way as a recommendation because this is a new direction, a new gamut for Kiowa. The town itself does not own or maintain the infrastructure regarding stormwater management, so it is very critical that the town align with the goals of the community association, but also engage the community in knowing that any changes that we make to our stormwater sort of upstream decisions and designs impacts downstream. And so we just need to be able to be careful and do this strategically, methodically, and take it to an approach. And so staff has recommended us phasing this. So the first phase, actually, the Planning Commission has made recommendation. Yesterday, Town Council did recommend approval for that first phase, but not necessarily moving in a direction that any changes will occur tomorrow, substantial changes. This will be not a single sheet sort of turned over and new regulations will be in place, but it does give us the ability to now really have the town in a more driver's seat to look at stormwater management for Kiowa. And so one of the things I want to do is just show you this slide that I provided to Town Council yesterday that kind of breaks down the phasing of this overhaul or phased approach to stormwater management. Today, we are...
The last page in their packet that
Okay, so Petra has indicated that that last sheet in your materials is the same slide. That first page, the first column is kind of what was done previously at our last meeting and what was recommended for approval, and Town Council actually acted on it as a first reading step. That puts the town itself in a position now to look at its review process for stormwater management. And what now we would do is essentially count every project on the island to look at it from a water quality and water quantity standpoint as it pertains to stormwater management. It puts the onus on a design professional, a professional registered licensed architect, landscape architect or engineer to really provide the town with their stormwater management plan that says this is how we are addressing stormwater. Today, our zoning code really does not have what I'm going to use the word teeth to enforce or really require the mechanisms, the strategies as a best management practice standpoint to put Kiowa in the best position regarding resiliency. Our zoning code, unlike many others, have not been updated regarding stormwater. If you've noticed, the city of Charleston, Charleston County, a number of municipalities within the last 10 years have updated their stormwater management requirements. This particular phase one now puts that requirement on the design teams to submit to the town a number of elements, documents, and other exhibits that show how they plan to address stormwater. So whether that's submitting additional grading, detail, a narrative, those things are built into now would be built into our application process. The final thing that it does, it essentially gives us greater control or greater mechanisms above what DHEC standards are. So a very limited amount of scope for projects on Kiowa actually get stormwater review, and that's just based on the size of the project. So most of our commercial and large-scale multifamily projects go through that particular process under our land development regulations, but our biggest impact on island is technically single-family residential. And so none of our single-family residential properties are going through that same process of stormwater management that we feel is necessary at this stage in Kiowa's maturation. So once we shift to getting a point of the structure and process in place, which is that's new section that was already came before the Planning Commission last month, and Town Council had its first reading on yesterday. What will be added onto that is now these proposed design standards or supplementary standards. And these are the proposed standards that would give the town, give property owners, the community, clarity on what options are available for them to be able to better manage stormwater runoff. So for today's discussion, what we want to do as staff is just outline some of those recommendations and hear some guidance from you all in direction as we prepare what would be a draft language and ordinance that would move forward. At some point in this particular process, which we've already begun to prepare, we're going to engage the community, bringing in engineers so that you all can have those specific questions regarding any numbers or metrics or analysis that would be completed as part of a review. If you notice in that middle column there, that first one says outline requirements through best management practices, but the second one says incorporate rainfall design storm events and projections. So we want to be able to utilize that type of nuance for every single project on Kiowa now, so that a property owner, as they do the designs, they're actually looking at current, more relevant data in their projections opposed to what's in DHEC's standards, so we're pretty broad in nature. The other component is for substantial, and staff will put together some recommendations here for council consideration as how we engage with either a third-party reviewer for stormwater management. So, for example, you all are familiar that we engage with Weston and Sampson to review the proposed Beachwalker, Upper Beachwalker, the West End, and Lower Beachwalker, the Ocean Pines development projects. We want to be able to sort of codify, if you will, that particular process, or at least institutionalize that within our permitting process as part of this second phase of stormwater management. The last part of this stormwater management, and I'm hesitant to use the word last because I see this continuing to evolve as we focus on resiliency, but that third component is really beginning to look at what I'm describing as in-the-pipe solutions. So this is really engaging with the community association to understand their capacity and questions that they may have regarding what happens at the outfall, what piping sizes are underneath. Do we need to have requirements to update our infrastructure? Number of the pipes on Kiowa, as you know, might have been constructed in the 70s, late 70s or early 80s. Are there any requirements to those types of things, which requires a lot more detail and engineer to be involved to understand what's out there? Many times you all probably are familiar when there's a project going on, someone discovers a new pipe or a new line that we're not well aware of, or it wasn't marked. So that's a end of pipe sort of solution of things that I think it's important for the community to also have as part of this particular process.
John, just from my understanding, gray infrastructure are the concrete pipes under the roads?
Yes.
Thank you.
One example, yeah. Yeah. We want to focus on green infrastructure, so more natural solutions. That's the goal here.
Okay.
So the goal is really looking at the quantity as well as the quality of the water that's being run off, correct?
Correct.
Quick,
Yep.
sorry.
Ms. Hennessy?
Yeah, I just want to get the procedural things right. We approved the amended language 12-169 last month, and I watched the town council meeting, and they discussed it in their first reading yesterday. So this is already, this first phase to modify 12-169 is well on its way. So what we're looking at now is that the additional Town of Kiowa Island standard. So we've got an ordinance, and now we're looking at defining what those standards are. Is that correct?
That's correct. So if you recall, at our last meeting, one of the comments raised by Mr. Pamar was ensuring that there were actually some actual standards in place that can be evaluated or part of that particular process. So that's exactly what you've outlined of what today's discussion will be. And wanting some guidance from you all as commissioners, and I think it's appropriate time, I'll just kind of maybe dive in here. What might be those appropriate different strategies? What might be the things that you feel are low-hanging fruit that should be automatic? Some other things that might require a little bit more debate or discussion. Is that too restrictive, not restrictive enough? Those are the kind of things that staff was wanting to hear today so that we have some guidance in preparing something that will come back before you at a later time. So I shared up here rainfall and design storm standards. Many of you have maybe seen a chart similar to this. What we've recommended, I kind of have alluded to, if you look really closely here, you'll see that the numbers vary between DHEC and Charleston County and James Island. We've utilized Charleston County and James Island as sort of our, I'm going to use the word rule of thumb or our baseline. And what this is just a probability. So these are looking at how the frequency of a year compared to the number of inches of rain within a 24-hour period, and how might that data be utilized to design a particular project. So that's one example. We can utilize this metric in our zoning code to dictate what outcomes of storms. The next is just really looking at how stormwater management on site is prepared. So just as simply, number one, reducing the amount of impervious cover, reducing the amount of runoff volume, reducing peak discharge rates. One of the things that I thought, and Patricia, who's, like I said, has been working on a lot of this as part of the planning staff, is giving the designer options. So we're not dictating that they have to do one of these. They can do a combination of these things, or have, and that's how the Charleston County's stormwater management manual is also compromised. And like, it lists a number of best management practices, and it's up to that designer to begin able to choose and pick, like, hey, this is how we're actually addressing the amount of runoff on a development project. This particular slide was just kind of an example that is probably without, I don't want to go too far into the weeds on this without having the engineers here, but I just wanted you all to kind of see one of the proposals. If you looked at the language regarding reducing impervious cover, one of the particular goals is hypothetically, if we had a property owner who had a 40% allowable lot coverage for maximum lot coverage, and they designed that particular project based on that lot coverage, we would then in tune find a number for this particular representation utilizing 33%. 33% represents the majority of our single-family residential lot coverage standards. So anything over that 33% would need to be retained on site before it enters that master drainage system as we think about runoff. So in this particular example, the area of coverage equals to about 39.37. If you were to take the difference between that 33%, which is that 3,000 number, that's approximately 581 square feet. We would ask that design team to really look at how whatever runoff is calculated based on that 25-year, 24-hour period for that amount of value be retained on site. So that's a metric number that gives the design teams saying, hey, do I need to put a rain garden in to hold that water? Do I need to utilize maybe some rain barrels? Whatever, some options.
Yeah, John, clarify me, where are we going? Are you showing us the types of things we're going to be talking about, or are we going to be talking about it today?
I'm going through all of those things that are particular options, and then I'm going to stop and then allow you guys to kind of say, hey, I like that one, or I don't like that one.
But I mean, I'm completely not confident in being able, these numbers are, I don't know what they mean. I mean, you said we're going to get some experts here to help us?
Yes.
Okay. So probably we should wait till the experts come.
I mean, I'd echo what Larry said. We're not engineers, and I look at all this stuff, and I don't feel confident to say, go with this, don't go with that. I think we should have you as staff and the experts say, these are the things we recommend, and they make sense because all these numbers, I don't know that any of us on the commission has the skills to
And Joanne, the other side too, I think we need to know the trade-offs. You know, it would seem to me that more retention is better, but at what cost? I mean, there's got to be some trade-offs too, because if there's no trade-offs, then you're going to go to the most conservative approach.
So what would be helpful for us, we can pause here. I think the goal of today was to introduce you to what.
Yeah,
the
I don't,
line-
if you've got more to tell, that's fine.
Yeah.
It's interesting to know about the things we're going to be talking about. I just don't feel qualified to talk about them right now.
Yeah, so that's why we didn't ask for you to make any decisions today. It was more so to have some initial conversation, but then more importantly, begin to think about those types of questions. And so you can begin to feed those questions to us as we engage with an engineer and setting up a workshop to provide some of those analytic and metric questions to be answered.
No, I think that's a good introduction, John. I think a lot of the concern for some people will be, how does the runoff affects the adjacent properties? You know, where you have a new home being built next to a home that's a lower elevation. And I think that's a good thing to discuss, and we can get experts to give us more opinions about things of that nature.
Yeah, so I'll just share it because it's there. The last two that were listed there are grading requirements. So we would look at now incorporating something into the ordinance that talks about how property is using grading to manage stormwater runoff. So we don't want grading going immediately to that property line and now all that water is dumping to the adjacent property owner. We want to be able to account for that in this particular ordinance. So what happens in the buffer areas adjacent in those adjacent properties, this can be opportunity for discussion there. So I'll put a pin there, and we'll get a potential date for you guys to put on your calendars and begin. But I really would like for you guys to think about what questions you would want to ask the engineer, so that way we can help be prepared for that particular meeting.
I'll go back to the trade-offs, for example. Will some of these increase the price of construction will it raise the price per square foot of a house? That would be understanding, that would be interesting to know, because, I mean, obviously that'd have an impact.
Okay.
John, one of the things I think, really argues we need a lot more information, but apparently you're either chosen to disregard or willingly disregarded the work now that's being done to manage stormwater by KICA and the properties. And you found it to be ineffective, incomplete, or counter to what you believe is required. And I don't understand where that conclusion is supported.
Andy, well, how did you form that? I read in here where they're cooperating.
Who does all of the stormwater management now?
I know you're right, but there was comments in here about working together. They're working with KI, they're working with these people, so they're not ignoring them.
It's working, it's not working together. It's all, the town is going to do this, the town is going to do that, the town has to have an ordinance, the town has to take charge. That's, go back and read all of what you heard, you're going to find that the emphasis is not working together.
So I
But
just
the
want
town
to, I just want
As the
to,
ordinance is.
I just want to correct something there, Ms. Capelli. The idea is that we have engaged the community association. They will be part of this process. As I open, the town does not control or manage any of the infrastructure tied to stormwater management. The other thing that I'll note is KICA's responsibility of stormwater management and their efforts are really only looking at end of pipe. So they're really only looking at capacity of their stormwater ponds and fluctuating up or down based on rainfall events, et cetera, making changes to the outfall, but they're not addressing specific construction practices, things that are on site of an actual development project. That's where we as a town want to be able to make sure that we're in sync of now that KICA's collectively and the town now addressing stormwater. So we're not going to intentionally ignore or disregard any of the efforts. I've already engaged the community association and being able to understand all of the different things that they've done. As you all, I shared with the Marsh Management Committee a memo from Ms. Shannon White, their last update. I can share that with the full commission. I think she'll be okay with me sharing that with the full commission, those particular changes and updates that they've made it to the stormwater. So we're not ignoring Kika. They will be part of this particular process as we go forward.
And the resort also?
The resort is part of the subcommittee, the Marsh Management Committee. I think at some point, we will need to involve the resort at the macro level when we think about how Kiowa was developed. The golf courses were originally part of that stormwater management system. And so, yes, I think that's part of this as well.
In terms of the.
And I'd like to address one thing. Larry said, you know, on cost, we built here where I am now 20 years ago. And there was, the town had a stormwater management because we have flooding here as well. And there was a requirement that all new construction had to show that all the stormwater runoff was maintained on their property. And yes, it did add somewhat to the cost, but that was determined to be important for the resiliency of the town, and it actually has worked quite well. And I think that's what the town of Kiowa is looking to do, and it makes sense.
Yeah, this is, in my mind, this is no different from any of our coastal regional area municipalities who are trying to solve for flooding and water quality issues. As a coastal community, our elevation, we're low, and so our options are minimal of how water moves around. City of Charleston, you've heard the discussions of building a seawall and all of those other types of nuances. I mean, we just have to do what works for Kiowa. And so this is our opportunity to kind of explore all of those different options. We'll get input from the community, but this is kind of a launching pad here for where we are today.
You're going back to some idea that suggests what's happening now is either not sufficient or needs to be improved in a significant way, that you're recommending what I would call an overreaction ordinance to what you believe the situation is. You have an ARB, you have design standards, and they do have site planning standards that consider runoff. They do. And if they don't, you now have a committee, the ad hoc committee, including the town, very well represented, setting the standards for the ARB. And those new standards will be applicable based on an agreement between that subcommittee, which includes, again, the town, and the ARB, that will change that. That's in progress. On the other hand, you have you haven't mentioned the utility, but the utility has responsibility for a lot, if not all, of the significant runoff on this island, and has managed it. The question is, you either don't have the information or haven't provided it that suggests that they're not doing the job that they're required to do. And I mean, even in here, it's your comparison with James Island, Charleston County, et cetera, is where they do not have their own management of water or runoff, or either water for quality or runoff by private sector, which we do here on Kiowa. So, you know, I'm at a loss again to understand how you're getting around all of what's here and suggesting we need to do more or better, and one size fits all that is not appropriate here on the island. We have a different structure.
Well, Andy, if I might just piggyback on what you're saying, and you started by saying, you know, what we have now, is it good? Is it working? Well, probably so, but the island's growing. We've got many, many more homes to be built.
Not many.
And we've got a lot of projects coming up. Some are very large, like, Ocean Pines and whatever. So I think we need to look at ways that we can improve and enhance this particular issue. And it's something we're obligated to. And, we are, when you say the town, we all are the town. And our job as Planning Commission is to assist the town with ideas, with feedback, and any type of suggestions that we can have to make this whole process better for the future. And that's just the way I look at it.
No, you're entitled to that, and I understand it. I think my point is, in order to make a recommendation that's soundly based, we need to have the information. The information on not only the effectiveness, but on what is being done now, cost effectiveness of something that's being proposed.
Sure.
And
But that's what we
reasons for
said.
changes.
We just said that we got to get more information.
We're going to get that with,
Yeah,
this is just initial to gauge reaction and get feedback. That's all it is, really. That's John's way I see today's session is to start this, and we will build on it. We'll get expert opinion and some advice, and we'll go from there.
but it's not just getting information to do something more. It's finding out what areas need to be adjusted and what needs to be done, whether it's more or less in certain areas.
Fair enough.
Yeah, just the last thing, just to note, that 2018 flood mitigation and sea level rise, that'll be a great resource. There's a lot of information in that report that will be related to, I think, the recommendations and discussions of sort of the why. So just
Okay.
kind of
Okay, if there's no further comments, I suggest we move on to correspondence and staff comments. John?
Yes, so I will be brief. Just based on today's conversation, we will get a date scheduled for ask for availability for bringing in engineers so we can have that dialogue. Update, yesterday, you might have heard MUSC, they're still under site plan review, that particular process. We anticipate maybe another couple weeks or so for them to get through all of the additional steps. One is getting the encroachment permit from the town of Seabrook. That meeting is scheduled for July 10th. So we anticipate at least another couple weeks to hear from that particular project going through site plan review approval. The other things to note, there are two, well, just one rather, one additional, what I would call, all of you have been tasked with some subcommittee or task force. Kind of the newest one, I've asked Mr. Eugene Hutchinson Eugene Babinek to represent the Planning Commission as an effort to engage with regimes as we continue to discuss and try to get some of the regimes on board of this permeable surfaces element. We've worked with Ocean Woods in the past of trying to get them through a process working with KICA and ARB, and so I think as this conversation continues, being a mouthpiece from the Planning Commission will be helpful in trying to bring the regimes updated and staying in tune with this particular conversation. So thank you, Gene, for doing that.
Thanks, Gene.
Happy to.
The Landscape and Tree Preservation Board had met, was that last week, week before? If yes, they're meeting next week again. Second Thursday of the month to continue their process. Mr. Iwan, Dr. Kerner on that subcommittee. The only other things, I think you all tuned into Town Council just regarding Main Road Corridor, that particular process. We won't have an update on the status maybe until late August. There were over 400 comments submitted regarding Main Road Corridor, Segment C. So just continue to kind of be patient, I guess, as we have been in understanding the findings of that. But staff will make a presentation of those public comments back to County Council at some period. The anticipated date right now is late August. That concludes.
What about Ando West and the Orange Tree?
I have no updates on either of those, but I will make some contact to see any status updates on those two developments.
What seems to be the problem on Orange, or on Ando West?
From my understanding, it could be a number of factors, one being, don't want to use the word change in leadership, but I think the change in leadership for the project management, some cost pricing discussions. I don't want to put anything on the record, but those have been the sort of comments heard.
Again, this weekend is going to prove it's long overdue, and certainly the Aristida proposal would solve a lot of those problems.
No, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jim. Public comments. Lance, go ahead, either of you. And again, thanks for sharing your afternoon with us.
Melissa Yearden, 40 Inlet Cove. I just really want to commend all of you for working on this critical issue of stormwater management. We are a coastal community, and it is only going to get worse. Mr. Capelli, I don't know where you live, but we live in Inlet Cove, and anytime it storms, our streets are flooded.
We live on an island every time it gets rainy,
Exactly.
our own island.
Exactly. So we need to manage that water. There has to be solutions, and that's exactly what Mr. Taylor and his team are doing. And so I hope that you push this forward. I hope that you keep considering these options. And in terms of currently projects that are going on, as I wrote to Town Council and Mr. Taylor last evening, when I was coming off of Beachwalker, the Cape was severely flooded, and how they were managing their stormwater runoff was they were pumping it into the adjacent property, which was the Beachwalker County parking lot. And the water was very murky. I'm not exactly sure what is in it. When the gentlemen workers saw me taking photos, they actually yelled at me to stop. So I'm not exactly sure what's going on with that. But certainly being in Inlet Cove, if that's how they're managing their stormwater, that's going to be a huge problem for us. And I can tell you, we woke up this morning to so many seagulls in our inlet, which we have never seen before. And we went out to see what was going on, and there were hundreds of dead fish in our inlet. And you know that this is a holiday weekend. There are so many families that are staying in our community that are fishing and that are kayaking, and we don't know what the reason is for the fish to be, floating dead in the water. Could it have contributed? I don't know. And so enforcement and really catching violations and having, having the opportunity to prevent this behavior really needs to be at the forefront of this discussion as well. But again, I commend all of you for tackling this topic, and it is so vital to the future of our island. Thank you so much.
Thank you for sharing those
Happy
comments.
4th.
Thank you. No other public comments? Okay. Commissioner comments. Let's start with Joanne.
I'm good.
Okay. Gene?
Thank you to Petra for catching us up with the minutes.
Okay. Larry?
You made it up to date.
So, John, when we do that, when we bring the experts in, when we start talking about that, do a workshop format. That's why we did it with the tree preserve, and that was very helpful to bring the experts in and we can bounce a lot of things off of. Okay? And the second thing to Andy's, yesterday Jane went to Bank of America to get some cash, and they were out of cash.
They were out of cash.
So
Oh, wow.
that's it.
That's hard to be on that one.
A bank, no money.
Okay.
They'll take it though, Larry.
I have a question for John. With respect to the planning department section on the website, if I see something that needs to be fixed, who would I send that to? Okay.
Andy?
No other comments except to thank Larry again for accepting all these subcommittee assignments.
I didn't know I had a choice, Andy. I didn't know I had a choice.
Must be giving up golf, I don't know.
Okay.
Probably a good thing.
But just in response, stormwater problems we have had personally at the house have been unusual and out of the norm. Storm surges, extensive rainfall. But except for storm surges, which really emanate from the river, the rainfall has not been an issue, the water runoff has not been an issue because of the way that water is managed, the stormwater is managed at the point. So I understand rainwater, I understand runoff concerns, but I got to tell you that the way the island is functioning, for the most part, has saved a lot of headaches on this island for a long time.
Thank you. Okay. Do I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Second. We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.